Ceann Comhairle, the last time I announced a budget in this chamber 2 years ago, none of us could have foreseen that the worst global pandemic in a century awaited us. We knew well about the risks associated with Brexit and had prepared for it. We could not have predicted the devastation which COVID-19 would leave in its wake. Both events have demonstrated the need for us to always prepare for the worst while striving for the best. Many lives were lost, many livelihoods were ruined. The COVID-19 pandemic was an unprecedented experience for all of us and unfortunately life-changing for so many. But it also brought out the very best in Irish society. The bravery, the resilience, the fortitude of our frontline workers, the commitment of those working in the community and care sectors, and the determination of ordinary people across our country to get their loved ones through the pandemic as safely as possible. Our efforts have worked. Our solidarity, our common purpose saved lives and allowed our society and our economy to reopen. Our country now reaches for a better, for a brighter future. And Minister McGrath and I have worked together with all parties and all colleagues in this government so that Budget 2022 is a path to that future. The COVID pandemic highlighted the role of government in supporting both our economy and our society. While the response from government was unparalleled, with over €48 billion provided for over 3 years, it was also a response that was fully justified. Through the pandemic unemployment payment, the employment wage subsidy scheme and the COVID restriction support scheme, approximately €17.5 billion has been directed to individuals, to families and to businesses. Our support did work. We responded in the right way at the right time. And this response was strengthened by the solidarity of the European Union. But could only take place due to the careful management of the economy in the years leading up to the pandemic. We managed our affairs well in better times, so we could support at a time of great national difficulty. We are now entering a new phase where we will recover from the pandemic, restore our public services and living standards, and repair our public finances. And in framing this budget, the government has been conscious of the cost of living pressures that are currently confronting so many citizens and so many businesses. As the recovery increasingly takes hold and as citizens get back to some level of normality, we in government also remain focused on our higher levels of debt, which my department is forecasting will come in at just under €240 billion next year, and with the real risks associated with that. Budget 2022 meets the twin goals of investing in our future, of meeting the needs of today, while putting the public finances on a sustainable path. So, turning to our domestic forecasts. While the reimposition of COVID-related restrictions during the first quarter of the year led to a further contraction in the domestic economy, the decline in activity was not as severe as that seen during the initial lockdown last spring. Due to the success of our vaccination programme, restrictions were eased over the course of the second quarter, with the domestic economy recovering strongly as a result. Modified domestic demand, the best measure of the domestic economy, grew by almost 8.5% in the second quarter and surpassed the level immediately preceding the pandemic for the first time since the start of the crisis. Having accumulated significant savings during the pandemic, consumer spending is leading the way. At the end of the second quarter, spending was just 3% below pre-pandemic levels. So, for this year as a whole, modified domestic demand is expected to grow by 5.25% and 6.5% in 2022. The strong rebound in domestic economic activity has been accompanied by rising inflationary pressures, with consumer price inflation expected to reach 3.7% in September, which would be the highest since June 2008. This recent rise in inflation is partly a result of temporary factors. They are expected to fade over time. This includes the normalisation of oil prices following their collapse in spring last year, and the mismatch between demand and supply that has emerged following the reopening of the economy. However, acute supply chain pressures, including in shipping capacity, shortages of raw materials, labour shortages in certain parts of our economy, as well as rising energy prices, means that there are further risks to inflation and to the cost of living. The Government also continues to be aware of and prepared for the risks and consequences of Brexit. Strong tax receipts throughout the year, particularly VAT and income tax, reflect the positive momentum in the economy. These receipts were built on the back of the Government's various support schemes over the past year and a half. Without these schemes, tax revenue would have plummeted as jobs would have been threatened and lost. The jobs outlook has now improved significantly. PUP numbers are now under 100,000 for the first time since the beginning of the pandemic, falling from almost 500,000 since early February. The sharp fall in PUP recipients and improved labour market conditions have prompted the current COVID-adjusted unemployment rate to fall below 10%, the lowest rate since the onset of the pandemic. By year-end, the unemployment rate is forecast to be just over 9%. Employment is expected to grow by just under 8%, or around 150,000 jobs this year. Next year, we expect the unemployment rate to fall to around 6.5% by the fourth quarter. This is still higher than we were before the pandemic. But overall, employment is expected to grow by just over 13%, or 275,000 jobs in 2022. Overall, more than 400,000 jobs will be added to the economy between this year and next, and employment is expected to reach and exceed its pre-pandemic level during the course of 2022. This performance, by any measure, represents a remarkable rebound in our jobs outlook. We are recovering. The resilience of the Irish people, sensible budgetary strategies before the pandemic, and our economic supports during the pandemic are the ingredients in the recovery. But this recovery must also deliver more homes, better progress on climate change, and help with a cost of living that is rising. And Minister McGrath and I know this. It has led to the important decisions in this budget. Public spending next year will amount to €87.6 billion. The Government has been steadfast in keeping this amount below the line laid out in the summer economic statement. Our medium-term strategy sets out that over the next two budgets, we will restore our public finances and phase out temporary COVID-related spending, and we will repair our public finances. This strategy strikes the appropriate balance between tapering supports and investing. In Budget 2022, core current expenditure will grow by 4.6%. This is in line with the trend growth rate of our economy. By 2022, we will only be borrowing for capital spending. It's worth recalling just how much this has changed, in particular how we entered the crisis with a budgetary surplus of €2 billion. In the summer economic statement of earlier this year, my department forecast a combined deficit of just over €34.5 billion for 2021 and for 2022. Ceann Comhairle, I am revising that forecast to €21.5 billion for both years, a reduction of almost 40%. This means that our debt as a share of national income is now falling. On this point, I believe that it is inappropriate to consider our debt burden in terms of gross domestic product, given the volatility of that measure associated with particular forms of economic activity. It will now be more important to reference national income. So, as a share of national income, our debt will therefore fall from 106% this year to 99% next year, reaching 89.5% in 2025. As such, we are now reducing our overall borrowing for this year and for next year. However, the amounts involved are still substantial. The expenditure associated with Budget 2022 will bring our overall national debt to just under €240 billion. This means debt of nearly €50,000 for any man, woman and child in the country. This is not where we want to be, where interest rates start to rise again. This is why we repair our public finances and put them on this footing. Today, I am announcing a budgetary package of €4.7 billion. This is in line with the summer economic statement and has not been changed as a result of the improved exchequer performance in recent months. This will be split between expenditure measures worth €4.2 billion, tax measures worth €500 million, and revenue-raising measures of approximately €230 million. The pandemic is still with us. We've also therefore made provision for temporary supports to continue in order to provide certainty for those most impacted and flexibility for the public finances should the situation with the virus deteriorate unexpectedly over the coming month. To this end, a contingency fund amounting to €4 billion will be created. In relation to the current supports, I have been steadfast in my commitment that there will be no cliff edge to the employment wage subsidy scheme, which has been an extremely successful policy instrument during the most challenging of times, one that has greatly assisted us in maintaining the link between employers and employees. I'm pleased to confirm that this scheme will remain in place in a graduated form until the 30th of April 2022. That is 6 months after the lifting of most public health restrictions and 2 months after the pandemic unemployment payment ceases. The following are the broad parameters of the extension. No change to the scheme for the months of October and November. Businesses availing of the EWIS on the 31st of December 2021 will continue to be supported until the 30th of January 2022. Across December, January and February, a two-rate structure of €151.50 and €203 will apply. For March and April of next year, the final 2 months of the scheme, a flat rate subsidy of €100 will be put in place. The reduced rate of employers' PRSI will no longer apply for those months, and then the scheme will be closed to new employers from the 1st of January of next year. These revised arrangements for this crucial scheme strike a balance between helping those businesses which continue to need support while recalibrating the scheme in light of the wider economic recovery. The aviation sector has paid a particularly heavy price during the pandemic. I'm therefore taking the opportunity in the forthcoming finance bill to amend the taxation arrangements which apply to international air crews under Section 127B of the Income Tax Code. This move will support that sector in its recovery. The reduced VAT rate of 9% for the hospitality sector will remain in place to the end of August 2022. As many have experienced over the past year and a half, remote working can become part of a better work-life balance. Government policy is to facilitate, to support remote work, and in this regard, I am announcing an income tax deduction amounting to 30% of the cost of vouched expenses for heat, electricity and broadband in respect of those incurred while working from home. This will be formalised in legislation through the Finance Bill. This will support living standards as the economy starts to recover and will also be kept under review from the perspective of its interaction with the national climate policy position. Ceann Comhairle, as prices rise and inflation returns, the government wants to ease the cost of living pressures which many are feeling. I'm therefore announcing today an income tax package to the value of almost €520 million. It will increase the standard rate band by €1,500 and secondly, increase each of the personal tax credit, employee tax credit and earned income credit by €50. These changes will benefit everyone who pays income tax. And along with other measures that will be announced by Minister McGrath and the Government, they aim to help citizens at a time when prices are rising. The Government also accepts the recommendation of the Low Pay Commission to increase the national minimum wage by 30 cents to €10.50 per hour. In addition, in order to ensure that the salary of a full-time worker on the minimum wage will remain outside the top rates of the universal social charge, the ceiling of the second USC rate band will be increased from €20,687 to €21,295, a move which will give a benefit to workers whose income was above that amount. I'm also retaining the exemption from the top rate of USC for all medical card holders and those over €70 earning less than €60,000. As everyone in this chamber is well aware, a core, if not the core challenge facing the country over the next number of years is housing. Recent figures show national property price inflation of just under 9% in July. The rise in prices is due to the imbalance between housing demand and supply, as well as the impact of the sum of the savings built up over the pandemic being directed into housing. I appreciate the strain, the anxiety, the worry caused by the shortage of homes. This is why the Government is determined to build more homes. This is why total housing expenditure has more than doubled since 2016, and as of 2021, it will be more than 40% above the peak level in 2008. The Government's Housing for All strategy targets delivery of, on average, 33,000 new homes per annum out to 2030. Housing construction has already rebounded rapidly this year, and there were almost 30,000 housing commitments in the 12 months to August. As part of Housing for All, I will be introducing a zoned land tax to encourage the use of land for building homes. The primary objective of this measure is to increase the supply of homes rather than to raise revenue. The tax will apply to land which is zoned suitable for residential development and is serviced, but has not been developed for housing. It will therefore target land in areas which are zoned residential or which are zoned for a mix of uses, including residential. I am not proposing to have any minimum size exclusion, as I see the potential of the tax to incentivise the development of small sites in town centres. In addition, to identify zoned land within the scope of the tax, maps will be prepared and published by local authorities in advance of the commencement of the measure. These maps will be updated on an annual basis. The Minister for Housing has indicated there will be a process established to enable any person to apply to their local authority to have the zoning status of their land amended. The process will be aligned with normal local authority procedures, and each case will be considered on its merits in the context of proper planning and sustainable development. An appropriate lead-in time for the general application of the zoned land tax will be required following its introduction in the Finance Bill of 2021. I am proposing a 2-year lead-in time for land zoned before January 2022 and a 3-year lead-in time for land zoned after January 2022. This will give scope to review the workings of the tax, to listen to stakeholders, to ensure that it is effective and equitable. The tax will be based on the market value of the land, and I have determined that the rate at the outset should be 3%. This aligns with the starting point for the vacant site levy when it was first introduced. The introduction of this tax is a very important step forward in encouraging the release of land for building homes, and depending on its impact, I'll be open to reviewing the rate in the future. There will be a number of exclusions from the tax, such as dwelling houses and their gardens, amenities and infrastructure. Other exemptions will be defined in the Finance Bill. The tax will operate on a self-assessed basis, and it will be administered by the Revenue Commissioner. Finally, it's worth noting that this tax will replace the vacant site levy when it comes into operation. Ensuring that people have access to home ownership in this country is an absolute priority for the Government. Focusing directly on those trying to access the housing market, the Help to Buy scheme has been a significant support for first-time buyers of new homes. For 2022, the scheme is being continued at current rates. Consistent with recent tax strategy group recommendations, I'm also announcing that a full review of the scheme will be carried out in the course of next year. Also on housing, I propose to extend the relief for pre-letting expenses for landlords for a further 3 years. This will continue to encourage landlords in the residential rental sector to return empty properties to the market as quickly as possible. I now turn to one of the most important issues of our era, climate change. Future generations will not tolerate inaction from the leaders of today. But by future generations, I do not just mean children that are yet to be born. Children, teenagers, the younger adults of today demand action. They deserve action. They are clear in their arguments. The science is unambiguous. The world is burning. And the only chance we have to control those fires is through coherent and effective policies. And that is why carbon taxation is important. The Finance Act of 2020 provided for annual increments in the carbon tax of €7.50 out to 2030. This provides a clear signal for producers and consumers in terms of the price of carbon. Studies have shown that carbon taxation is likely to be the single most effective climate policy that can be pursued by government. Although it's not the only one and will not, of course, deliver required emissions reductions on its own. We have seen challenges around energy supply. We have seen the challenges around prices. This is why the government is conscious of how this impacts on our most vulnerable. But this is why new monies raised in this change will be invested in targeted social welfare initiatives to prevent fuel poverty, to ensure a just transition. It is why the additional revenue from carbon tax will be used to invest in a socially progressive national retrofitting programme. The 2019 Climate Action Plan also recommended the development of an enabling framework for microgeneration to tackle existing barriers and establish suitable supports for relevant markets. To that end, I am proposing a modest tax disregard in respect of personal income received by households who sell surplus electricity that they generate back to the grid. I made significant changes to the vehicle registration tax system in last year's budget to strengthen the environment rationale of VRT in line with government commitments to radically reduce emissions from road transport. The structure of new car sales for 2021 compared to 2020 is evidence of the success of this approach, with an increase in vehicles registered at the lower end of the VRT scale. I am proposing further changes in this regard to strengthen this approach. From January 2022, a revised VRT table is being introduced. The 20-band table will remain, with an uplift in rates as follows: a 1% increase for vehicles that fall between bands 9 and 12, a 2% increase for bands 13 to 15, and a 4% increase for bands 16 to 20. In addition, to continue to incentivise the uptake of electric vehicles, I am extending the €5,000 relief for battery electric vehicles to the end of 2023. Finance Act 2020 extended the Accelerated Capital Allowance Scheme for energy-efficient equipment. In accordance with wider government policy to reduce reliance on fossil fuels, I am providing that equipment directly operated by fossil fuels will no longer qualify. The scheme seeks to support the transition to lower emission fuels in the heavy-duty land transport sector. Therefore, I am extending the ACA scheme for gas vehicles and refuelling equipment for 3 years. As a transport fuel, renewable hydrogen offers significantly higher carbon savings when compared to fossil fuels. I'm also extending the scheme to include hydrogen-powered vehicles and refuelling equipment. This policy is aligned with wider government policy to reduce our emissions to achieve net zero by 2050. Ceann Comhairle. Farming families have, of course, a central role to play in protecting the environment over the long term. Supporting the next generation of farming families is essential for guaranteeing the long-term future of agriculture and the agribusiness sector. They too have a critical role to play in the national recovery from the pandemic. As such, I intend to extend the various farming stock relief measures. General stock relief will continue to the end of 2024. Stock relief for young trained farmers and farm partnerships and the young trained farmer stamp duty relief will continue to the end of next year. These measures, designed to support young farmers, are deemed to be a state aid by the EU, allowable under the Agricultural Block Exemption Regulation. The current exemption is scheduled to expire on the 31st of December of next year. Therefore, I can only extend these reliefs to that date. However, I have been advised by the Department of Agriculture that they are confident that reliefs of this nature will continue to be considered an acceptable form of state aid under the terms of any revised regulation. I'm hopeful, therefore, that I will be able to provide a further extension of this relief next year, as well as the stock reliefs for young trained farmers and farm partnerships. The reviewed and revised EU Alcohol Directive now permits the granting of up to 50% excise relief, 50% excise relief to independent small producers of cider and other fermented drinks products. I see this relief as having a similar positive effect as that provided for small independent producers of beer, and have asked my officials to engage with the sector to allow for the implementation of this relief in next year's finance bill. Supporting entrepreneurs and the wider business community will be central to our broader national recovery. They are indeed the backbone of our domestic economy, supporting tens of thousands of jobs across the country. That is why I am implementing a package of measures to support our smaller businesses and entrepreneurs. Turning to the Employment Investment Incentive Scheme. It has the potential to become a real driver of investment in early-stage companies and high-potential startups. In recent years, changes have been made to the scheme, but it has yet to reach its potential. Today, I am announcing an extension of the scheme for a further 3 years, and I'm also bringing forward a number of important improvements, the effects of which will be to make the scheme more attractive to investors, to the ultimate benefit of companies in their start-up years, and then to the economy through job creation. More significantly, and following engagement with relevant stakeholders, I intend to open up the scheme to a wider range of investment funds, and I'm confident that this measure on its own will result in greater investment in early-stage enterprise. In addition, subject to certain windows, I'm relaxing the rules around the so-called capital redemption window for investors. I'm also removing the 30% expenditure rule, which is unduly restrictive in the context of the self-assessment principles that now apply to the relief. In last year's budget, I announced the government would commit a €30 million investment through the Ireland Strategic Investment Fund to establish an innovation equity fund with a mandate to invest in domestic high-innovation enterprises. Today, I can announce the government intends to commit a further €30 million investment to this fund through Enterprise Ireland. This will be matched by €30 million from the European Investment Fund, subject to board approval. Through a memorandum of understanding being agreed by all three parties, the Ireland Strategic Investment Fund expects to participate with its €30 million as a co-investor, leading to potential investments of up to €90 million for predominantly early-stage Irish SMEs. It will launch in early 2022 and will increase the availability of early-stage funding for our entrepreneurs, for our youngest companies. It will be consistent with other priorities, such as promoting regional development, supporting female entrepreneurship and climate change initiatives. Today, I'm also announcing an extension of the Section 486C corporation tax relief for certain start-up companies to the end of 2026. Data shows that this relief continues to support employment and businesses in a cost-efficient manner. In view of the challenges companies currently face accessing the relief, start-up companies will now be able to avail of the relief for up to 5 years, in place of the current 3 years. These changes will provide greater certainty to recently established companies and those seeking to launch, as we recover from the pandemic. Further details can be found in the review of the relief, which has been published today. As I announced in my budget speech last year, I'm introducing a new tax credit for the digital gaming sector. This sector has seen exponential growth across the world in the past decade. However, employment growth in the sector in Ireland has not matched this trend. It should. The relief will support digital game development companies by providing a refundable corporation tax credit for expenditure incurred on the design, production and testing of a game. The relief will be available at a rate of 32% on eligible expenditure of up to a limit of €25 million per project. There are synergies with our established film and animation sectors that will support quality employment in a creative and digital arts sector that has so much potential. Full details of the relief will be published in the Finance Bill, and as European state aid approval is required for the introduction of the credit, it will be introduced subject to commencement orders. To support public health policy to reduce smoking in Irish society, I'm also increasing excise duty on a pack of 20 cigarettes by 50 cents, with a pro-rata increase in other tobacco products. This will bring the price of cigarettes in the most popular price category of up to €15. Since its introduction in 2013, the bank levy has been extended on several occasions. It currently applies to the end of the year. The annual yield of this levy has been approximately €150 million. I'm extending the levy for a further year. However, as Ulster Bank and KBC are leaving the market in 2022, I intend to exclude them from the charge. In addition, I am proposing that the remaining banks will pay the same amount in 2022 as they did this year. This equates to approximately €87 million in total. I've also instructed that the levy and its future be assessed over the course of the coming year. In accordance with our commitments to international tax reform, Finance Bill 2021 will complete our transposition of the anti-tax avoidance directives. I'm providing for the introduction of a new interest limitation ratio and the new anti-reverse hybrid rules, both of which have been developed over the year with the input of stakeholders through a public consultation. This leads to corporation tax. Ceann Comhairle, the Government has taken the historic decision to join the global political agreement on the future of corporate taxation. The importance of our 12.5% rate is well known to this House. Budget speeches by my predecessors, indeed by myself, made the case for this rate. However, I strongly believe that our national interest is now best served by joining this agreement. It maintains our tax competitiveness and it strengthens our position in the world. The agreement which we shaped is balanced and represents a fair compromise. While there will be a cost to the Exchequer, it provides long-term certainty for businesses, for investors, for the benefit of Irish jobs. And as a small open economy that depends on rules and order in global tax and trade, an agreement was in our interests. The question of the rate was the biggest challenge for Ireland. So we successfully made our case. Due to our efforts, the minimum effective rate was set at 15% for larger multinational companies. It could have been far higher. It could have been more uncertain. We avoided those risks. That is why it is in our interest to be in. When it comes into effect, Ireland will apply the new minimum effective rate of 15%. This will still be less than many of our key competitors. Importantly, Ireland will continue to offer the 12.5% rate for businesses with revenues less than €750 million. This means no change for our 160,000 businesses employing 1.8 million people. We will remain an attractive location for investment, and we will continue to play to our strengths, centred on a highly educated and dynamic workforce that has consistently delivered innovation and profitability over many decades to businesses that have made Ireland their home. I know that this was a major decision, but it is the right decision for Ireland, for our jobs, for our economy, and for our ability to attract and keep investment in our country. On the broader challenges associated with taxation into the future, last year I announced the establishment of an independent commission on taxation and welfare. The commission was tasked with considering how best the tax and welfare systems can support economic activity, can promote increased prosperity, while ensuring that there are sufficient resources available to meet the costs of our public services and supports over the medium to longer term. This work will be essential for continuing to put our public finances on a sustainable basis over the coming years. The Commission will have a particular regard to the impact of the pandemic, as well as long-term developments such as ageing demographics, the move to a low-carbon economy and the rise of digital disruption and automation. We will be continuing with this work. A public consultation will be launched over the coming weeks. We'll seek input from our country. This will inform the Commission in completing its important work. And I look forward to considering its recommendations when they are published next summer. So, Ceann Comhairle, I want to conclude by again paying tribute to the heroes of the COVID pandemic, both seen and unseen, including those involved in the rollout of our vaccination programme. Without all of them, we would not be where we are today, planning for the resumption of safer times. So for those whose jobs have not yet returned, let me again reiterate that this government stands with you. For those concerned with the rising cost of living, this budget will help you. For those worried about whether they can own a home or afford their rent, this budget will support you. And for businesses looking to the future, this budget will back you. That future, for individuals, for families and for businesses, is based on secure public finances. We make further progress to that goal in this budget. Over the past year and a half, we made the right choices at the right times. Let us now do that again. I am an optimist by nature. I believe that as we move out from under the dark cloud of the pandemic, there are truly exciting times ahead for this country and for its people. Yes, there are many challenges. Yes, there are many difficulties. But a good journey to a better Ireland is within our grasp for 2022 and beyond. This budget, Budget 2022, sets the course for that journey. With this, I commend this budget to the House.
Thank you very much, Minister.